Judge Harrison looked at me over her reading glasses, the Cook County courtroom humming with fluorescent disapproval. "Ms. Winters, you're requesting an emergency order of protection against Mr. Theodore Nash?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, clutching the tissue I'd strategically dampened before entering. "He's been stalking me," showing up at my work, my gym, sending hundreds of texts. I'm terrified. My lawyer, a shark in Armani I'd found through my best friend's divorce, nodded sympathetically. We'd rehearsed this performance for 2 hours yesterday. The shaking hands, the broken voice, the perfect victim. I'd even practiced my shaky signature, the one that said fear instead of guilt. What Judge Harrison didn't know, what nobody in that courtroom knew, was that 48 hours earlier, Theo had walked in on me in our Lincoln Park apartment, with Blake, in our bed, the bed where Theo had proposed to me 6 months ago with his grandmother's ring. But I'm getting ahead of the story. Let me tell you how I turned being caught red-handed into a restraining order against the man I'd betrayed. 3 days before the courtroom drama, life was perfect. I had Theo, sweet, devoted Theo, who worked as a pediatric nurse at Lurie Children's Hospital. 6 feet of gentle giant, who cried at Pixar movies and made me breakfast every Sunday. We'd been together 3 years, engaged for 6 months, planning a fall wedding at the Chicago Botanic Garden. That morning, he'd left me a note on my coffee mug. "Sophie, you make every day better. Can't wait to marry you. Dash T with a little heart drawn in the corner." I'd thrown it in the trash without reading it, already texting Blake about meeting up. I also had Blake, corporate lawyer, CrossFit obsessed, the kind of aggressive personality that made Theo look even softer by comparison. We'd met at a networking event 4 months ago. I'd told him I was engaged within 5 minutes of meeting him. He'd said, "That's a shame," and handed me his business card anyway. "You don't strike me as the marrying type," he'd added, eyes scanning me like I was a contract to negotiate. "Too much fire for the white picket fence life." He was wrong about that. I was the marrying type. I just wasn't the faithful type. Blake was a thrill, but Theo was a provider. Blake was a conquest, but Theo was security. I needed both. The affair started 2 weeks later. Hotel rooms during lunch breaks, the Palmer House, the Langham, anywhere expensive enough to feel like I wasn't cheap. His Gold Coast apartment when Theo worked night shifts, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Sometimes we'd stand naked against the glass, daring the city to see us. While 20 miles away, Theo was saving sick children and thinking his fiancé was at book club. I told myself elaborate lies, that Theo was too safe, too predictable, that I needed excitement before settling into marriage, that Blake was just scratching an itch. What Theo didn't know wouldn't hurt him. But the truth was simpler and uglier. I liked the power. I liked having devoted Theo at home and dangerous Blake in hotels. I liked being 2 different women, loved by 2 different men, playing 2 different games. I was drunk on danger, on the thrill of betrayal dressed up as freedom. Funny how lies we tell ourselves sound so reasonable at the time. That Tuesday started normally. Theo had left for an early shift, kissing me goodbye at 5 a.m. "Love you, Soph? Thai food tonight?" "Can't wait," I'd mumbled into my pillow. By noon, I'd texted Blake. Theo was supposed to work until 8. We had hours. Blake arrived at 1:30, letting himself in with the key I'd had made. That should have been my first warning, giving my affair partner a key to the apartment I shared with my fiancé. But I was drunk on the danger of it all. We didn't make it past the living room at first. Blake had this way of taking control that made me forget everything else. By the time we stumbled to the bedroom, I'd forgotten that Theo sometimes came home early when the unit was slow. The bedroom door opened at 2:17. I know the exact time because I saw Theo's watch when he raised his hand to his mouth in shock. The watch I'd given him for his 30th birthday. Sophie? That single word held so much. Confusion, disbelief, the beginning of a pain I'd caused but wouldn't have to feel. Blake, to his credit, tried to grab his clothes. But Theo wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me, those kind brown eyes trying to process what they were seeing. His work badge still hung from his scrubs. He'd come home early from the children's cancer ward to surprise me, and instead he walked into his worst nightmare. "I brought you flowers," he said. And that's when I noticed the bouquet of sunflowers on the floor where he'd dropped them, my favorites. He brought them every month on the anniversary of our first date. Even now, in his shock, he was still thinking of me. "Get out," he said quietly to Blake. "Now." Blake dressed faster than I'd ever seen him move in court. "This is awkward," he muttered, like he'd been caught in a minor social faux pas instead of destroying someone's life. "I said get out." Theo's voice was steel. I'd never heard him use that tone, not even when dealing with difficult patients' parents. Blake left, probably already scrolling through his phone for his next conquest before he hit the elevator. He was gone within minutes, leaving me naked under a sheet, staring at the man I'd promised to marry. "Theo, I can explain." "No." He held up his hand. The engagement ring he wore, yes, he'd insisted on wearing one too, caught the afternoon light. "Just no." He left the room. I heard him in the hall closet, pulling out bags, the sound of hangers scraping, drawers opening, the mechanical sounds of a life being dismantled. I threw on a robe and followed him. "Where are you going?" "My brother's." He wouldn't look at me. "I'll come back for the rest later." "Theo, please, let's talk about this. It didn't mean anything. Blake is nobody." "Blake?" He laughed, but it was sharp, bitter. "His name is Blake? God, Sophie, how long?" "It doesn't matter." "How long?" 4 months, I whispered. He stopped packing. 4 months? We'd been engaged for 6. We'd been planning our wedding while I'd been sleeping with another man. "I'm sorry," I said, and in that moment I almost meant it. I don't know why I did it. "I do," he said, zipping the duffel bag. "Because you could. Because I trusted you completely. Because I was stupid enough to think you loved me the way I loved you. I do love you." "Stop." He finally looked at me. "Just stop. Love isn't what you do when the person is working. Love isn't giving your apartment key to someone else. Love isn't this." He left with just the one bag. I heard his car pull away and realized I'd lost the best thing in my life for afternoon excitement with a man who'd probably forget my name within a month. But here's where my story differs from the tearful redemption tales. I didn't spend the next hours crying and realizing my mistake. I spent them calculating damage control. Theo was beloved at the hospital. Our friend group would side with him. My family adored him. The narrative would be simple. I was the cheater, the homewrecker, the villain, unless I changed it. I called my friend Diana first. She was the biggest gossip in our circle. "Theo and I broke up," I said, letting my voice crack. "I caught him with someone else." The lie came so easily, too easily. "What? No, Theo would never." "I thought so too," I sobbed. "But I came home early from work with a migraine." I paused, adding convincing details. "Diana, it was another man, from his hospital. I think they've been together for months." "A man? But Theo's not." "That's what I thought," I wailed. All those night shifts, all those weekend conferences, he was living a double life. It was genius, really. Not only was I the victim, but I'd created a lie Theo would be too embarrassed to refute. In one phone call, I'd destroyed his reputation and protected mine. I painted a picture of walking in on Theo with a mysterious man, added details about finding suspicious texts, hinted at behaviors I'd ignored. By the end of the call, Diana was furious on my behalf. "That bastard! And he always acted so perfect." "Please don't tell anyone," I said, knowing she'd tell everyone. "I'm so humiliated." Within hours, the story was spreading. Theo was at his brother's, presumably not checking social media, not defending himself. I had the narrative advantage. Truth didn't matter if I got to speak first. But Theo didn't follow the script I'd written for him. The texts started that evening. Not angry ones. That would have helped my case. Instead, they were practical. When could he get his things? Did I want to handle the lease transfer? Could we please be civil about dividing the furniture? I responded by not responding. Let them pile up. Documentation. Thursday morning, he showed up at my office. I worked in marketing at a tech startup in the West Loop, all open floors and glass walls, perfect for witnesses. Sophie, we need to talk. He looked exhausted. 2 nights of processing betrayal will do that. I told you I don't want to see you, I said loudly enough for my coworkers to hear. What? Sophie, you haven't answered any of my messages. I just need to get my things. Please leave. You're making me uncomfortable. I let my voice shake. Jessica from accounting was already watching. Confusion crossed his face. Uncomfortable? Sophie, what are you— Security, I called out. This man is harassing me. The security guard, Paul, approached. He knew Theo. He'd signed him in dozens of times for lunch dates. Everything okay here? He won't leave me alone, I said, adding a tremor to my voice. I instinctively took a small step back, right into Jessica from accounting's line of sight. We broke up, and he can't accept it. Sophie, what the hell are you doing? Theo's confusion was shifting to anger. Perfect. Sir, I'm going to need you to leave, Paul said, clearly uncomfortable. Theo looked between us, understanding dawning. You're serious? You're actually doing this. He left without another word. But I had witnesses now. Poor Sophie, harassed at work by her ex. He tried the gym next. I'd been expecting it. We had a couples membership at the East Bank Club. I made sure to be on the treadmill in full view when he arrived. 5 minutes, he said, approaching carefully. Just give me 5 minutes to talk. I stepped off the treadmill, grabbed my phone. I'm calling the police. The police? Sophie, for God's sake. I dialed 911. I'm at the East Bank Club on Kingsbury. My ex-boyfriend is here harassing me. I've asked him to leave multiple times. Theo stared at me like I was a stranger, which I suppose I was. The Sophie he'd loved would never have done this, but that Sophie would have been the villain in everyone's story. This Sophie was the victim. I'm leaving, he said quietly. But this is insane, Sophie. You know this is insane, right? The police arrived after he'd gone, but I filed a report anyway. Another piece of documentation. The texts kept coming. Increasingly frustrated, asking why I was doing this, asking what he'd done to deserve this treatment beyond trying to collect his belongings. Each unanswered message was another exhibit for my case. Friday morning, I walked into the law offices of Sheridan and Associates. I need a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend, I told the lawyer. He won't stop contacting me. Shows up at my work, my gym. I'm scared. We spent 2 hours crafting the petition. The lawyer, Melissa Sheridan, was thorough. Any history of violence? No, but he's getting increasingly aggressive. Not a lie, technically. His texts had shifted from confused to angry. Any witnesses to the harassment? My coworkers. The security guard. The police have a report from the gym incident. She nodded. We can file for an emergency order today. If granted, he'll have to stay away until the full hearing in 2 weeks. Which brings us back to the courtroom. Judge Harrison reviewed the petition, the text logs showing dozens of unanswered messages, the witness statements I'd orchestrated. Mr. Nash, are you represented by counsel? The judge asked. Theo stood in the gallery, looking lost. No, Your Honor. I didn't think I'd need a lawyer to get my belongings back. These are serious allegations, Mr. Nash. You're accused of stalking and harassment. Your Honor, I walked in on her. He stopped, shook his head. I just want my things. My grandmother's nursing pin is in that apartment. My father's chess set. I'll gladly never contact her again if I can just retrieve my belongings. I let out a small sob. Melissa squeezed my shoulder supportively. Ms. Winters has indicated she feels unsafe with any contact, the judge said. Then have someone else get them, Theo said. Have the police escort me. I don't care. I just want this to be over. But I couldn't let it be over, not until the narrative was complete. Your Honor, he's minimizing his behavior. The constant texts showing up at my work. Because you won't answer, Theo finally snapped. Because you turned me into a villain for trying to have one conversation about why you destroyed our relationship. Perfect. There was the anger I needed everyone to see. That's enough, Judge Harrison said sharply. Mr. Nash, I'm granting the emergency order. You are to have no contact with Miss Winters. No calls, texts, emails, or third-party contact. Stay at least 500 feet away from her home, workplace, and any other locations listed in the order. Your Honor, my belongings can be retrieved through the police department. They'll coordinate a time for you to collect your things with an escort. She looked at him over her glasses. Violate this order and you'll be arrested. Is that understood? Theo looked at me one last time. The hurt in his eyes had been replaced by something else. Disgust, maybe? Or pity. Understood, Your Honor. He left without another word. I'd won. The restraining order painted me as the victim, him as the aggressor. The story would spread. Poor Sophie, who had to get legal protection from her unstable ex. Outside the courthouse, Melissa congratulated me. That went well. He seemed volatile at the end there. I just want to move on, I said, playing the role to the end. Blake texted that night. First contact since Tuesday. Sorry about the drama. Hope you're okay. I deleted it without responding. Blake had served his purpose. A momentary thrill. A dangerous distraction. But he'd cost me more than he was worth. The victory felt hollow that night in the too-quiet apartment. Theo's coffee mug still sat by the sink. His scrubs still hung in the closet. The indent of his body still marked his side of the bed. I'd won the narrative battle. In the court of public opinion, I was the victim who'd escaped a troubling situation. Theo was the unstable ex who'd required legal intervention. But alone in our apartment, my apartment now, the truth sat heavy as Lake Michigan humidity. I'd destroyed a good man who loved me, not just cheated on him but gaslit him, manipulated the system, and turned his attempts to move on into criminal harassment. The texts from Diana and others poured in over the next weeks. I heard Theo's been spreading lies about you. Stay strong, girl. Can't believe he's playing victim after what he did. The support felt like poison, each message a reminder of the lies I'd built. But I kept building them, adding layers. I told my mother Theo had been emotionally abusive. Told my coworkers he'd been controlling. Each lie required 3 more to support it until I could barely keep track of my own story. The full hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Theo didn't show. His lawyer appeared instead, agreeing to the permanent order in exchange for the return of his belongings without police escort. A clean break, no further drama. My client wants to make something clear, the lawyer said after the judge left. She handed me an envelope. This isn't a legal document. Just a personal message. He wanted you to have it. I opened it in my car. Theo's handwriting, neat and careful as always. Sophia, I know what you're doing. I know about the lies you've spread. Diana called my brother horrified about my secret life. I could fight this. David has the security footage. My colleagues would testify to my character. But I won't. You're sick, Sophie. Not evil, but sick. The woman I fell in love with wouldn't have done this. She's still in there somewhere, buried under whatever pain or fear drives you to hurt people who love you. I'm leaving for South Sudan next month. Médecins Sans Frontières needs pediatric nurses, and I need to be somewhere my help matters. I hope someday you'll get help too. Despite everything, I want you to be happy. I just can't be part of that journey anymore. Theo. I burned the letter in my sink that night, watching his forgiveness turn to ash. Even in his pain, he was trying to save me. That's who I'd thrown away. A man who could see my cruelty and still hope for my redemption. "He just wants to move on," the lawyer told me quietly outside the courtroom. "You've made your point." My point. As if this had been about making a point rather than protecting myself from the consequences of my own actions. I kept the restraining order story going for months. Poor Sophie, betrayed by her ex who turned scary when she ended things. I even went to a support group for women dealing with stalkers, sitting in a circle with actual victims while I spun my tale of harassment. "The hardest part," I told the group, "is that I really loved him once, before he showed his true colors." They nodded sympathetically, offered hugs and tissues and solidarity. And I accepted it all, adding their support to my armor of lies. One woman, Carmen, had an ex who'd broken into her apartment 3 times. Another, Janet, showed us photos of her slashed tires, dead flowers left on her doorstep, the word whore spray-painted on her car, real stalking, real terror, and there I sat, manufacturing tears about Theo's threatening attempts to retrieve his grandmother's nursing pin. "You're so brave," Carmen told me after one session, "standing up to him like that." I went home that night and threw up. Not from guilt, I'd killed that emotion, but from the contrast. These women lived in genuine fear while I lived in a penthouse of lies I'd built myself. The group became my new stage. Each week I'd add details to my story, careful to keep them consistent. How Theo had love-bombed me early in our relationship. He'd been affectionate and kind. How he'd isolated me from friends. I'd chosen Blake over social events. How he'd controlled our finances. He'd managed bills because I forgot to pay them. "Classic abuser pattern," the facilitator would say, and I'd nod like a survivor instead of a predator wearing victim's clothing. But karma has a way of balancing scales. 6 months later, I ran into Theo's brother at Millennium Park. David had always been protective of Theo, and I braced for confrontation. Instead, he smiled sadly. "Hey, Sophie." "David, the restraining order says—" "I'm not Theo," he said calmly. "The order doesn't apply to me. Though I'll leave if you want." I should have walked away. Instead, I asked, "How is he?" "Gone. Took a job with Doctors Without Borders. Said he needed to be somewhere his help actually mattered." David studied me. "You really did a number on him." "He did a number on me too," I said, clinging to my story even then. David laughed, but it was hollow. "Sure, that's why you had Blake over while Theo was at work." My blood chilled. "How do you—" "Your neighbor has a Ring camera. Caught Blake coming and going for months. Time-stamped videos of you kissing him in the hallway while wearing the engagement ring my brother gave you." He shrugged. "Theo didn't want to use them in court. Said it didn't matter anymore. But I kept copies, just in case you try to destroy anyone else." "Are you threatening me?" "No, Sophie. I'm telling you that your story has an expiration date. Truth has a way of surfacing." He turned to leave, then paused. "You know what the saddest part is? Even after everything, Theo still hopes you'll get help. Still thinks there's good in you somewhere. That's the man you threw away." He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. Theo in scrubs, covered in cartoon characters, surrounded by smiling children in hospital beds. "This was last week in Juba. He's saving lives while you're still destroying them. Those kids will grow up because of him. What will your legacy be, Sophie?" David left me standing there, my carefully constructed narrative suddenly feeling fragile as spring ice on the Chicago River. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't threatened me, he'd just shown me the truth. It was far more effective than any of my lies. The photo haunted me. Theo's smile was genuine again, not the careful one he'd worn in our last months together when he'd sensed something was wrong, but loved me too much to push. He looked lighter, purposeful. happy in a way I'd never made him. The truth did surface slowly. Blake, drunk at a bar, told the story of the crazy chick whose boyfriend walked in on them. Someone connected the dots. The neighbor with the Ring camera shared footage with someone who shared it with someone else. The story shifted, evolved, revealed itself. Within a year, I was the villain again. But this time, it was worse because I'd played victim so convincingly. The support group asked me to leave. Friends distanced themselves. Even Diana, who'd been my first call, sent a text. "I can't believe I defended you. Bien." The unraveling started small. Blake, drunk at a company party, bragged to colleagues about the crazy chick who tried to get a restraining order on her ex after he caught us. One of those colleagues knew someone who knew someone who knew Diana. Chicago's legal community was incestuous like that. Then the Ring doorbell footage surfaced. David had been strategic. He didn't blast it on social media like some vindictive ex. Instead, he showed it quietly to key people. Our former mutual friends, my book club, the gym where Theo and I had worked out together. Each viewing was a small assassination of my carefully crafted reputation. 3 months of footage, our former neighbor had told anyone who'd listen. That Blake guy had his own key. Sometimes they'd be going at it in the hallway, couldn't even wait to get inside, while that sweet nurse was working nights saving kids. The support group facilitator pulled me aside after Carmen mentioned she'd heard disturbing rumors. "Sophie, we need to talk about your continued participation in the group," she said gently. "This is a space for genuine survivors. If your situation has been misrepresented, it's harmful to the other members." "I don't know what you've heard," I started. "I've seen the footage. I've seen the court documents. Theo Nash was trying to retrieve his belongings, not stalking you." Her voice hardened. "You sat in a room with women who've experienced real terror and appropriated their trauma. Do you understand how damaging that is?" I left that night and never went back. Lost my job 2 weeks later, officially for budget cuts. But Jessica from accounting had stopped talking to me after learning the truth. My LinkedIn filled with views but no messages. Turns out falsely accused ex of stalking doesn't look great on a resume. I left Chicago eventually. Too many ghosts, too many people who knew the real story. Moved to Indianapolis, started over. New job, new apartment, new lies about my past. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Theo. Wonder if he's saving lives in some refugee camp, finding purpose in helping people who actually need it. Wonder if he's found someone who deserves his trust. I still have the engagement ring. Kept it despite everything, though I'm not sure why. Sometimes I hold it up to the light, remembering the night he proposed. We'd been ice skating at Maggie Daly Park. He'd gotten down on one knee right there on the ice, nearly fell over, and we'd laughed until we cried. "I promise to love you through everything," he'd said, snow falling around us like a scene from a movie. The whole rink had erupted in applause. Strangers took photos of us, 2 people radiating joy, convinced we'd found forever. I'd posted those photos everywhere. #engaged, #perfect proposal, #future. Mrs. collected hundreds of likes and hearts while already knowing I was bored, already eyeing other men, already planning my escapes. The ring sits in my jewelry box now, next to the earrings he'd bought for my birthday, the ones he'd saved for while I was spending afternoons in Blake's bed. Sometimes I wear them to job interviews, these diamonds bought with pure love, hoping they'll bring me luck. They never do. It's like they know they're touching corrupted skin. That's what haunts me most. Not that I got caught cheating, not even that I filed a false restraining order, but that I had someone who would have forgiven me for the first betrayal if I'd just been honest. Instead, I chose to destroy him to save myself. The restraining order is still active, a permanent reminder of my temporary victory. Sometimes I Google him, but there's nothing. He really did disappear, probably saving lives somewhere while I push papers in Indianapolis. I won the battle I created, Painted myself as the victim, him as the villain. Got my restraining order, kept my reputation for a while, avoided the consequences of my actions. But I lost everything that mattered. And somewhere out there, Theo is healing from wounds I inflicted while I'm still bleeding from ones I gave myself. That's the price of turning love into a weapon. You might win the fight, but you'll always lose the war.